Hey guys, tonight we start in the stone-walled quiet of a medieval monastery. The kind of place where even the shadows feel obedient, and time itself bends to the tolling of a bell that never apologizes for ringing. You're wrapped in a scratchy wool robe, because of course you are, and it's well past midnight when the sound starts. A thin, metallic clang that slices through your dream like a letter opener through confession parchment. You blink once, maybe twice. You already know what it means. Midnight vigil? You groan inside your head, but your body knows the drill. You rise, creaking like a poorly maintained drawbridge. Every muscle complains, not dramatically, not painfully, just in that ancient, monastic way that suggests your bones now belong to God. And God is not big on ergonomic bedding. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere weird or wonderful, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle toward the chapel, clutching your candle like it's the last source of heat in the known universe. It's not, but still this place runs on cold stones and colder rules. Monastic schedules are famously rigid. Wake at midnight, chant in Latin, pray in Latin, sit in Latin. Even your yawns feel like they need a translation. You're not alone. Across the cloisters, other monks drift like ghosts under the moonlight. No one talks. Talking is for after prime, which comes much later. For now, you've got matins, roughly an hour of chanting that starts with Psalm 3 and ends somewhere around the "Why are you still awake?" part of Psalm 89, and yet the rhythm is comforting, human, even. There's something oddly satisfying about aligning your life to the divine office, the set of prayer hours that divide the day into clean little segments. Monks didn't wear watches, but they kept time better than anyone, thanks to bells, shadows, and the haunting regularity of devotion. Fun fact, medieval monks were some of the best timekeepers in Europe, which is hilarious, considering they didn't care much for worldly time. They had water clocks, sundials, and eventually mechanical contraptions that rang bells automatically early. Alarm clocks that only worked if you liked your alarm set to eternally anxious Gregorian chant. But the human part, that's still here. Your candle sputters. A monk to your left sneezes, breaking the sacred silence in a way that would be funny if you weren't also trying to pretend your stomach isn't growling. Dinner was hours ago. Breakfast is basically theoretical. By the way, speaking of odd routines, historians still argue whether monks actually enjoyed this fractured sleep schedule, or whether they just got really good at pretending. Some theories suggest segmented sleeping in 2 blocks, with a waking period in between wasn't just religious, but biologically normal for pre-industrial societies. You, at this point, are unconvinced. You just want a nap. But sleep isn't a priority here. Obedience is. The rule of Saint Benedict governs nearly everything. When to eat, what to say, how to breathe. Well, not that last one, but it sure feels like it sometimes. And tonight, it's your turn to be reader. You approach the lectern, candle flickering beside the enormous handwritten book that looks like it weighs more than your moral conscience. You chant, slowly, rhythmically. Latin phrases rise and fall like waves. Someone in the back coughs. No one reacts. Outside, the wind howls through a cracked window. You don't flinch. It's almost peaceful, in a vaguely haunted sort of way. You imagine how monks might have heard the same sound 600 years ago and wondered if it was a demon or just bad weather. Probably both. Everything was both back then. Your section ends. You sit back down. A small bench beneath you threatens your tailbone's structural integrity. Still, you find yourself breathing slower now, your mind drifting not with fatigue, but with routine. The power of it, how the same actions, repeated daily, turn chaos into something manageable. Did you know some monasteries employed timekeepers called Their job was to make sure no one was slacking off during prayer. Imagine being spiritually audited even now, as you start the final early morning prayer. You feel the invisible presence of someone judging your posture, but you're still here, still upright, still part of the great humming machinery of devotion. Maybe that's the strange comfort of it. In a world where nothing makes sense, here's a place where everything is done exactly the same, every single day. Eventually, the vigil ends. The final bell rings, not with joy, but with inevitability. The monks file out, silent as always. You follow, letting your candle snuff itself out. The air is cold again, but your thoughts are warmer than before. You crawl back into your wooden bed, not soft, not warm but familiar. The sky is still dark, though dawn can't be far. And as your eyes finally begin to close, you realize something strange. For a life that's supposedly about self-denial, this monk thing has a certain rhythm that makes it easier to fall asleep, ... or at least, to drift. You wake up underwater. Not literally, but that's how it feels. The air is heavy, damp, and smells faintly of olive oil, sweat, and old marble. You blink, once, twice, and you're in ancient Rome now, specifically, lounging in a caldarium, the hot chamber of a Roman bath. Your skin is flushed from the heat, your fingers pruny, and someone nearby is loudly explaining the benefits of goat milk exfoliation. This is your morning routine. Here, time is managed not by clocks, but by the sun's angle across the mosaic floor, and by the bath schedule etched into the habits of every self-respecting Roman citizen. The bathhouse isn't just for getting clinettes, your gym, your social club, your newsstand, and your daily gossip generator, all rolled into one steamy package. And you, lucky sleeper, are right in the middle of it. First, a quick plunge into the frigidarium to wake yourself up. You yelp quietly as the cold water slaps your skin. A toga-wrapped elder smirks at you from the edge. He's been doing this since before you were born, probably since the Republic still had some dignity. After drying off with what feels like an aggressive wool curtain, you make your way to the tepidarium. This is where real-time dilation kicks in. You lose track of minutes as you recline on a heated bench, massaged by steam and lulled by the rhythmic splash of ladles hitting stone basins. Someone is debating Cicero's Ethics over by the brazier, which feels both pretentious and oddly soothing. You didn't come here just to stew, though. After a while, it's off to the untorium, the massage room, where a young attendant begins scraping oil off your back with a curved bronze blade designed for hygienic exfoliation, or possibly light torture, depends on the angle. Despite the awkwardness, there's structure here. Romans were fanatical about routines. The elite especially had strict daily itineraries, mornings for clients and politics, afternoons for baths and leisure, evenings for dinner parties where you're expected to identify the wine vintage by smell alone. No pressure. And dinner, that's no slapdash affair. It's called a cena, and it involves reclining on couches, balancing great platters on your belly, and pretending you're not mildly offended by fermented fish sauce in everything. You'll spend 3 to 4 hours nibbling olives, dissecting philosophy, and possibly dodging a drunken poet reciting bad Ovid knockoffs. Historians still argue whether all Romans followed such structured days, or if these routines were limited to the elite, those who had time to bathe for 5 hours and complain about the quality of their imported You, apparently, fall into that privileged category tonight. Lucky you. Also, ad factremans had specific spoons for different parts of the meal. The cochlea was for soft-boiled eggs, the ligula for soups. You've got 3 balanced precariously on your plate now, and someone across from you is judging your spoon choice. You pretend not to notice. As night falls, you're ushered into the triclinema grand dining room, where the host insists you sit next to a senator's cousin's niece, because politics and seating charts are the same thing here. You murmur pleasantries and nod along as someone talks about a new aqueduct. It's fine. The wine is strong, and you stopped caring 5 sips ago. Back then, time wasn't marked with wristwatches or even mechanical clocks. Instead, the Romans divided daylight into 12 hori, which changed length with the seasons. That means in winter, an hour might be as short as 45 minutes. Summer hours stretched longer. It's like living inside a math problem, but strangely, it works. You'd never check a clock, yet you feel the day progressing. Everything has its place. Even chaos is on a schedule. By the time you stagger home still faintly damp, slightly buzzed, and overly perfumed, you realize how neatly the Romans arranged their lives around shared rituals. Not just for order, but for identity. What time you bathe, where you dine, how you wear your toga, all says who you are, or at least who you want to be. You fumble with the wooden bolt on your door, slip inside, and collapse onto a low couch. The oil lamp flickers beside you. Outside, a street performer plays a melancholic flute melody, while someone yells about a stolen goat. The usual. your thoughts begin to drift warm and lazy like steam rising off a marble floor. The sounds of Rome fade into a soft murmur, part lullaby, part background noise. You remember something someone said back in the tepidarium time? Like water, flows where it pleases. You close your eyes and decide that, tonight at least, you're okay with being swept along. The first thing you notice is the silence. Not the kind of silence that hums gently, like a monastery at midnight, but a crisp, sharpened stillness like a sword freshly drawn. You are in Edo period Japan now. The sun not yet risen. The air thin and clean, like paper about to be inked. Your futon creaks as you rise. You've slept on the floor, of course, because beds are for the decadent and the Dutch. You swing your legs over and press your feet to the matting is cool beneath your soles. Somewhere outside, a rooster decides to play its role right on time. You sigh softly. Sunrise training waits for no one. Your first stop, dental hygiene, 17th century samurai style. You take a pinch of crushed oyster shell and mix it with a few drops of peppermint oil. They actually did that. Tan begins scrubbing your teeth with a twig shaved into a primitive brush. It's not the worst thing you've ever done to your mouth, but it's up there. Then, quietly, with absolute care, you don your kimono. Layered, left side over right, secured with an obi. The ritual is automatic by now. Every fold, every knot. A muscle memory passed down by generations who believed presentation was as vital as the soul itself. You do not rush. You do not yawn. Even your sleepiness is expected to look composed. You step into the courtyard, where the air carries the scent of damp stone and last night's tea. It's time for kokizomi, the first calligraphy of the year, though today it's just practice. You kneel on a straw mat, brush poised, and begin to write. The characters must be smooth, intentional, effortless in appearance, and maddening in execution. But even this is routine. You don't just write to communicate. You write to reflect your character. The brushstroke is the person. Every hour of your day is measured not by clocks, but by flow. The water clock in the next room measures time with dripping water and bamboo sticks. That tip when full. You can hear it faintly. Plip, plop. Each sound marking the passage of time in a way that's somehow more poetic than practical. You move on to sword drills. Because what is a life without balance? This is not a battlefield, this is morning exercise, and every cut must be exact. You practice kata alone, feet crunching lightly on gravel. Even when no one is watching, the form matters. Especially then. Historians still argue whether most samurai truly lived like this, or if it's just the elite warrior poets we've romanticized to exhaustion. But someone definitely did. Enough to write poetry between spear throws and clip their toenails with ritual precision. And speaking of toenails, later today, you'll help your younger sibling fold 1,000 origami cranes as part of a temple offering. No scissors, no glue, just precise, patient repetition. You're not even halfway done, and your hands already hate you. Quirky fact of the day, Edo period folk believed that sleeping with your head pointing north was bad luck. So every night, you rotate yourself slightly, measuring with a homemade compass fashioned from a floating magnet and, oddly, a carp scale. It's unclear if it works, but it's your third best superstition. By midday, you're kneeling before a lacquered tray holding rice, pickled plums, and a miso soup that's still judging you. Meals are eaten in silence, with precise movements. No slurping, no spilling, no licking. The bowl of in, if the miso deserves it. You chew slowly, eyes lowered, and try not to drop a grain. It's not just manners, it's... As the sun reaches its peak, your father dictates a letter to a daimyo, and you sit by the shoshi screen, transcribing his words with ink so black it seems to shimmer blue. You envy the ink. It gets to flow. Later, you help your mother sweep the garden paths with a broom made of bound reeds. There's hardly any dirt, but you sweep anyway. Every pebble placed just so. Routines here aren't just actions, they're spiritual. Sweeping is purifying. Folding clothes is reverent. You've seen a neighbor fold a handkerchief like it's a sacred relic. Evening descends gently. Shadows lengthen. You light the paper lanterns with a small taper. One by one, their glow flickering across the courtyard. You catch your reflection in a pool of water and adjust your posture slightly. Instinctively, slouching is dishonorable even in private, even while thinking about carp. As the stars appear soft pinpricks in the blue silk of the sky, you join the household for a poetry reading. Bashu tonight. His verse floats in the air like incense. On a withered branch, a crow has alighted nightfall in autumn. You exhale. You've heard it 100 times, but it always lands. You wash your face with rice water, brush your teeth again, and finally slide into bed. Just a mat and a blanket, but it feels earned. Outside, the wind stirs the bamboo. Somewhere nearby, a cricket chirps once, like a punctuation mark. You close your eyes and think, tomorrow will be exactly the same. And somehow, that's a comfort. The room smells like lavender and sadness. You're in Victorian England now, somewhere in a parlour layered with lace, portraits, and just the faintest aroma of powdered chalk. The air is cold, and the mirrors are covered in black cloth. Someone died last week, possibly a great-aunt, possibly just someone's parrot. Either way, mourning is mandatory and it's scheduled. You're wearing black, not edgy black, not cool villain in a novel black. You're in heavy, woolen, sweat-trapping, funeral black down, to your boots, gloves, and bonnet. Even your handkerchief has a matching trim, and you are not to smile, at least not for another 4 months. Rules are rules. Victorian routines are nothing if not structured, and grief comes with a guidebook. There are entire pamphlets on how long to mourn a cousin versus a stepfather. Historians still argue whether these mourning schedules were sincerely followed or just used to guilt relatives into sending flowers on time. You begin your morning at the dressing table. A maid brushes your hair not because you can't, but because this is a house with staff, and appearances must be upheld even when your eyes are puffy. She uses a comb with wide ivory teeth and sprinkles rose water across your scalp. You'll grimace slightly. It feels like being politely drowned. After dressing, you descend a narrow staircase, gliding like a polite ghost. Breakfast is served in near-silence toast marmalade, tea with milk, and exactly 1 hard-boiled egg because it's Tuesday, and that's what Tuesday calls for. Your brother coughs once and is met with a stare so severe it could curdle milk. Small talk is frowned upon until at least post-breakfast. You write letters, dozens, condolences, thank yous, invitations to tea in 4 weeks. When morning enters its half-morning phase and you can legally wear grey, you practice your copper-plate handwriting, ink your quill, and try not to smudge the black edge of the stationery. Victorian grief comes with branding. You pause to sniff a locket of hair tied with blue ribbon. You're not entirely sure whose it is, but someone labelled it Harold. Could have been a cousin, could have been a hamster. Hair preservation was very in. Did you know some families made mourning jewelry out of real human hair? Delicate woven brooches, lockets, even bracelets. It's both touching and mildly creepy, like if Itsy had a baby. Your daily walk begins promptly at noon. Morning doesn't exempt you from fresh air. You'll loop twice around the park, avoiding eye contact with men, dogs, and overly cheery flowers. Your boots squeak, your corset pinches, and your parasol keeps catching the wind like a judgmental bat. Returning home, you observe the daily tea ritual. It's 4 o'clock on the dot. The maid sets out a delicate service of lemon biscuits and Darjeeling. You pour with 2 hands, one for the pot, one for stability. You stir clockwise, always clockwise. Your aunt once gasped when you did otherwise. This kind of routine might seem stifling, but you start to see its appeal. There's a rhythm to it, an order. Even your sadness is scheduled. You're told when to cry, when to sip, when to embroider initials on a black handkerchief in it gives shape to something otherwise shapeless. You spend the evening with your embroidery hoop, a delicate floral pattern, mostly thorns and lilies. You prick your finger and blot the blood with your sleeve, as is tradition. Or, well, not officially, but it certainly feels on brand. Later, you join the family in the drawing room. Your uncle reads aloud from a serialized novel in a brooding voice, something about orphans and betrayal. It's surprisingly comforting. You sip warm sherry and glance at the grandfather clock as it ticks its measured, mechanical lament. Here's a quirky fact. Queen Victoria mourned Prince Albert for 40 years. She wore black for the rest of her life. Her servants were required to set out Albert's clothes every morning, even decades after he'd been lowered into the royal crypt. Imagine the dry cleaning bill. It's no wonder an entire culture followed her example. Mourning became not just etiquette, it became fashionable. There were mourning warehouses, mourning crepe suppliers, even mourning-themed tea. You retire to your room with a small lantern, casting flickering shadows across the wallpaper. It's got a floral pattern, but all the flowers are drooping. You brush your teeth with charcoal pastexilin for whitening, terrible for taste, and wrap your hair in a muslin scarf to maintain its natural wave, which you've been coaxing into existence for weeks. Your diary lies open on the writing desk. You scribble a few lines about sorrow, discipline, and a particularly judgmental pigeon you saw on your walk. He knows what he did. Finally, you extinguish the lantern. The room falls into thick, velvet darkness. Outside, a carriage rattles by on the cobblestones. Somewhere downstairs, a clock chimes the hour with the solemnity of a funeral hymn. You sigh. The blanket is heavy, so is everything, but at least the weight is familiar. And tomorrow, like today, your grief will be on time. You are sweating, but not in a frantic, running late for work kind of way. This is intentional sweat, ceremonial sweat. You're in an Aztec Temazcal, dome-shaped stone sweat lagand. The air feels like it's trying to persuade your skin to quit its job. Steam rises from red-hot volcanic stones splashed with water and herbs, copal sage, maybe something vaguely. You're kneeling, unclothed, except for a cotton wrap that's clinging to your every regret. Across from you, a priest hums softly, eyes closed, pressing a carved obsidian pendant to his forehead. This is your morning routine in Tenochtitlan, the sprawling Aztec capital where skyscrapers have yet to rise, but pyramids already touch the sky. The steam lodge is more than a bath. It's a cleansing ritual, physical, spiritual, cosmic. You're not just purging toxins, you're making yourself fit to face the world. Historians still argue whether the Temazcal was primarily a health treatment, a religious rite, or a socially mandatory sauna from which no one emerged gracefully. Possibly all three. Outside, the city is already humming. You step into the open air, still damp, blinking at the light, bouncing off canals, obsidian tools, and rows of bright feathers strung from market sale. You're late. The priests are already scanning the skies, because here, the calendar rules all. You hurried past, vendors selling tortillas and roasted insects, dodging a child, chasing a turkey, and make your way toward the temple. Your job today, glyph duty. You're a scribe's apprentice, and your task is to carve, paint, or otherwise immortalize the will of the cosmos into something that can be filed, and probably misinterpreted in 600 years. You kneel before a giant slab and begin copying glyphs. Your brush is made of agave fiber. The ink, powdered minerals, mixed with maguey sap. It smells like dusty fruit and destiny. The symbols aren't words exactly, they're concepts. Entire stories packed into jaguar claws, eclipses, and maize stalks. You try not to smear the day's fate with your elbow. Time, here, is cyclical. Days repeat every 260-day ritual cycle overlaid by a 365-day solar calendar. Every day has a deity. Every action is recorded. Even sneezing might have cosmic consequences. You pause to drink chocolate from a clay cup, not sweet, not milky, just bitter and spicy and alive. It's your mid-morning energy booster. Aztecs believed cacao was a divine gift from Quetzal. Also, it's the only thing keeping you from face-planting into your own glyph. By late morning, the marketplace is in full swing. You slip away to run errands. A jaguar pelt for the priest, more incense for the ceremony. You pass by rows of amaranth, obsidian blades, and tiny figurines made of maize dough. Weird historical tidbit. Aztecs used cacao beans as currency. You could literally pay your taxes with chocolate, which makes the IRS seem even more joyless in comparison. You return to your household compound, where your younger sibling is anxiously watching the sky. A priest said the stars looked wrong last night. That's never good. Could mean famine, could mean war, could mean someone forgot to feed the sun. It's daily sacrifice. That's the thing about Aztec routine. It's not just ritual, it's responsibility. If you don't perform the right rites, the universe might just call it quits. Lunch is maize, porridge and beans, eaten in this. Conversation is reserved, measured, full of metaphor. You ask your uncle what he thinks about today's omen. He says the hummingbird flew backward, which is either poetic genius or a genuine ornithological emergency. In the afternoon, you're tasked with helping prepare offerings. You stack flowers, marigolds, and magnolia petals into a pyramid shape. Every layer has meaning. The colors, the scents, the direction they face. It's like crafting a bouquet for a god who's very particular about interior design. You're not part of the priesthood. Not yet, but you attend the rites. Today's involves drumming, chanting, and a mock battle reenactment that ends with someone very enthusiastically pretending to be sacrificed. You clap politely. Ritual bloodletting was common, but the big sacrifices, those are rare, spectacular. Yes, but not daily. Contrary to popular belief, they didn't sacrifice everyone, just a statistically uncomfortable number of people. By sunset, you're exhausted. You climb the steps of your home and watch the red sky bleed into purple. A priest across the street blows into a conch shell. You join your family on the roof to offer a prayer to Toneshu, the sun god. You hold a handful of flower petals to your chest and whisper thanks that it didn't crash today. You know tomorrow will be the same. But also, not, because the day's number changes. The god changes. The sky, the rituals, your duties day, all shift within the great puzzle of the cosmos. It's not a calendar, it's a wheel, and you are riding the spokes. Later, as night thickens, you lie on a woven mat beneath a reed ceiling, watching fireflies flit across the shadows. Your body aches in the way that says you did the right things in the right order. You tick off the events in your head like glyphs carved into the day's memory. You close your eyes. You dream of feathered serpents and singing stones. You wake only when the stars turn. You're standing way too close to a royal posterior. Welcome to the Tudor court, where the king's daily routine is your full-time job, and today, you're on groom of the stool duty. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. The chamber is stuffy, filled with the scent of beeswax, damp velvet, and centuries of carefully repressed dignity. You're holding a linen cloth in one hand and a glazed ceramic chamber pot in the other. Outside, trumpets sound. Inside, it's just you, the king, and a deeply unfortunate power dynamic. See, in Tudor England, routine was hierarchy, and if you're close enough to assist with His Majesty's intimate moments, it means you're trusted. Groom of the stool was a real position reserved for noblemen, not servants, because knowing the king's diet and mid-morning temperament gave you serious political leverage. The phrase dirty politics never felt so literal. Once the royal business is complete and His Highness has waddled off to get dressed in 12 increasingly complicated layers, you exhale deeply and make your way to the breakfast chamber. Today's menu: pottage, bread, and ale. Yes, because in the 1500s, water is basically a gamble. You sip cautiously, pretending it doesn't taste like malty sadness. The queen passes by in a gown heavy enough to crush a goat. You bow. She doesn't see you. She's busy making sure her headdress doesn't impale anyone. After breakfast, the day properly begins. At court, that means layers of ritualized movement, attending the royal dressing, participating in the morning mass, whispering politics in corridors while trying not to trip over someone's fur-lined slippers. It's like a social chess game where everyone's overdressed and nobody actually knows the rules. Historians still argue whether all this ceremony was for tradition's sake or just one long performance designed to intimidate visitors and exhaust rivals. Either way, you play your part. You nod, bow, deliver scrolls, and try not to roll your eyes when someone uses the word verily in casual conversation. Around midday, the king takes a walk in the gardens. You follow, discreetly. He's in a rare mood, humming under his breath, pointing at trees, occasionally stopping to shout about foreign diplomats. You nod along like his opinions on Spanish cloaks are riveting. This is your life now. Lunchtime arrives with the kind of excess that makes your stomach nervous. Trenchers of roasted meats, candied fruits, pies the size of children, and a goose that probably had a name. You eat standing up, in a side room, using a crust of bread as both plate and napkin. Silverware exists, but good luck getting more than one fork. And did you know? Tudor cooks used crushed emeralds and powdered coral in some medicinal dishes, because nothing says healthy like digesting a gemstone. You return to your quarters after lunch and find that someone has left a new cap for you, plush, with an absurd feather. Fashionable, yes. Practical, no. You look like a suspicious bird. Your afternoon is filled with correspondence. You help a nobleman compose a passive-aggressive letter to a bishop, laced with flourishes, vague threats, and one sentence so elaborate it may actually be illegal in modern grammar. Writing back then was all about performance. The longer the sentence, the more powerful you clearly must be. Later, a court musician practices the lute near the fireplace, playing the same song over and over until even the tapestry seems mildly annoyed. You escape outdoors for a breath of fresh air, where two courtiers are arguing about falconry etiquette. One accuses the other of an ungraceful glove gesture. You back away slowly. The sun dips lower, and it's nearly time for the evening revel. You clean your face with a damp cloth, freshen your doublet with a dab of rose oil, and attend the festivities. It's a blur of music, awkward dancing, and dangerously warm wine. A poet recites a sonnet about gout. Someone faints. A jester juggles apples until one explodes. You clap politely, trying not to yawn. But the king notices. He narrows his eyes. You blink twice and shift your weight, channeling just enough enthusiasm to survive. As the evening winds down, you'll help the king undress, process involving 10 buttons, 3 laces, and an awkward silence during the removal of hose. He doesn't say goodnight, he just grunts. You take that as a blessing. You return to your room. Not luxurious, but serviceable. A straw-stuffed mattress, a pewter basin of cold water, a candle flickering in the draught. You peel off your sweaty, wine-stained layers and stare out the small window. The moon hangs like a polished coin in the sky. You think, bizarrely, of the chamber pot again. That moment of intimacy. The raw, absurd closeness to power. You wonder if the king ever thinks about how weird it is to be so thoroughly witnessed. Probably not. Kings rarely do. You slide under your coarse blanket, still smelling faintly of mutton and lavender. Your eyes begin to close as the sounds of the revel echo down the stone halls. You know tomorrow will bring the same strange schedule, the same rituals, the same sideways glances, the same incredibly personal towel duty. But in a life that makes little sense, at least you know exactly what time you'll be horrified by breakfast. Your morning begins not with a rooster's crow or a bell's toll, but with the soft, measured sound of a bamboo rake sweeping gravel into perfect concentric circles. You're in Ming Dynasty China, now inside the quiet elegance of a scholar's courtyard, and the tiled roofs in hues of pearl and jade. The air is cool and smells faintly of sandalwood and last night's calligraphy ink. You rise from your low wooden bed, stretch your limbs with gentle restraint, and slide open the lattice window. In the distance, someone is already steeping tea with the kind of solemnity usually reserved for state funerals. You begin your day with Dao Yunan, early form of what we'd now call You raise your arms, breathing in deeply, feeling the air fill your lungs like scrolls being unrolled. Then you exhale slowly, bending at the waist, your fingers grazing the earth as if bowing to the ancestors themselves. This is not exercise for fitness. It's exercise for alignment, for harmonizing your breath with the key. The flow of life energy believed to swirl through the universe like cosmic broth. Historians still argue whether Qigong was primarily medicinal or spiritual, or whether it was just an extremely poetic excuse for slow stretching. Regardless, your spine cracks in 3 satisfying places, so it's working. Afterward, you dress robes of indigo and white, bound with a soft sash, hair pinned in place with a sliver of jade. You are a Shi de Fu, a gentleman scholar. You've passed the imperial exams, or at least. You're still recovering from the trauma, and now you spend your days doing what all respectable Confucian men do: writing, reading, sipping tea, and slowly losing your eyesight. Breakfast arrives on a lacquered tray. Rice porridge with pickled vegetables, a salted duck egg, and a small clay teapot that seems almost smug about its craftsmanship. You eat slowly, in silence, using chopsticks that have been smoothed by time and respect. Mid-morning, a friend arrives through the side gate. You've scheduled a quiet debate, which, in practice, means sitting beneath the plum tree and politely accusing each other of misunderstanding the Analects. The two of you quote Confucius until the squirrels fall asleep. One of you argues that virtue is self-discipline. The other insists it's social harmony. You both sip tea and nod solemnly, knowing that the answer is yes. Quirky fact of the day: scholar officials in the Ming Dynasty often carried around tiny scent pouches filled with dried flowers, herbs, or even powdered deer musk, supposedly to improve concentration or, more realistically, to distract from the smell of centuries-old scrolls and limited bathing opportunities. As the sun climbs higher, you retreat indoors and sit at your writing desk, carefully selecting a brush with a goat hair tip. You mix your ink with rhythmic strokes on an inkstone, adding water drop by drop until it's just right. Calligraphy is not writing, it's meditation. Every character must be deliberate, balanced, and quietly. You begin a letter to your cousin, who's stationed in the south as a magistrate. You offer him subtle advice, disguised as a poem, and passive-aggressive judgment hidden inside a compliment. You close with a proverb so vague it could mean three things, or none. He'll love it. Lunch arrives. Steamed buns, bok choy in sesame oil, and a soup that tastes like patience. You share it with your elderly aunt, who reminds you that if you don't marry soon, the family dog will be your only descendant. She is joking. You think. After lunch, you rest, not a nap. Exactly just sitting in stillness. A formalized zone-out that's somewhere between meditation and dignified daydreaming. You think about a dream you had last week. Your ink pot spilled, forming the character for emptiness. You haven't stopped thinking about it since. In the late afternoon, students arrive for their lesson. You instruct them in the 4 books and 5 classics, pausing only to scold the one who sneezes too loudly or questions Lee without also citing Wren. You assign an essay on filial piety, then send them home with paper so thin it might actually be offended if handled carelessly. You wander the garden. The pond is still, except for a lazy carp that seems spiritually indifferent to your presence. A white crane lands briefly on the wall before taking off again, an accidental brushstroke across the day's painting. As the sun dips low, you light a stick of incense and bow to the household altar. You murmur a short prayer, not so much for blessings, but for continuity, for another day that makes sense in its repetition. Dinner is modest. Millet, tofu, and chrysanthemum tea. You drink slowly, watching the steam curl upward like a dragon's sigh. No loud noises, no rushed bites. Every meal here feels like a quiet negotiation with time. You clean your brushes and roll up your scrolls. One final letter, this time a poem to a friend in suit. It ends with a description of tonight's moon, its face reflected in the inkstone. Even the moon knows how to wait. You smile, just a little. Before bed, you dip your hands in warm water, infused with orange peel and camphor. You remove your jade ring and place it in a carved wooden box. Then you blow out the lantern and lie on your back, staring up at the painted ceiling. The house creaks gently. Outside, the wind moves through bamboo like whispered verses. You close your eyes, knowing that tomorrow will be nearly identical. And that's why you sleep so well. You're underground now, not metaphorically. You wake up in a narrow, torchlit passage beneath the sands of Egypt, buried somewhere in the twisting corridors of the Valley of the Kings. But don't panic. You're not a mummy. You're a worker, a stonecutter, one of the handful of elite artisans granted the rare honor of carving eternity into walls. Welcome to Deir el Medina. Circa 1300 BCU, live in a walled village full of scribes, masons, painters, and the kind of bureaucrats who can inventory a goose in 2 scripts. It's early, barely dawn. The air is dry, the kind of dry that makes your tongue feel like it's been sandpapered in your sleep. You rise from a reed mat, stretch your back until something pops, and wrap yourself in a simple linen tunic. It's itchy, it's beige, it's timeless. Your neighbor is already outside feeding his cat, which is both sacred and smug. The daily routine begins fast. You and the other workers gather at the edge of the village as the foreman reads out a sign. You're down in tomb cavers something or other, chiseling glyphs onto the wall near the Anubis panel. It's a job of precision. Carving eternity requires a steady hand and a suspicious amount of coffee. Well, not coffee, more like beer, because in ancient Egypt, breakfast means beer and bread. Light beer, mind you, but still, nothing quite starts your day like a fermented barley smoothie. You gulp it down with a bite of honey-soaked flatbread and head toward the tomb entrance with your tools. It's dark inside. Your only light comes from oil lamps, which give off a flickering glow that makes shadows dance across half-finished gods. You kneel and begin to chisel, each tap deliberate. You're inscribing the book of the data guide for the soul's journey through the underworld. You know these spells by heart. You could recite spell 125 in your sleep. Here's a fun, eerie fact. Many tomb artists left tiny signature marks, hidden birds, initials in hieratic script, even sly graffiti. A kind of eternal "I was here" scribbled just beneath Osiris's foot. Your foreman checks your work, mutters something about spacing, and moves on. You wipe sweat from your brow and adjust your chisel. The walls are dry limestone. They bite back if you're sloppy. Mid-morning break. You and the others step outside for air. The sun is brutal, so you huddle beneath a cloth canopy and talk about whatever counts as gossip here. Who's feuding with whom over grain rations, whether Pharaoh actually visits the village, and whether that statue of Thoth moves slightly overnight. Historians still argue how rigidly structured these workers' days were. Evidence from Astroka shards of pottery used like notepads shows surprisingly precise records. Who was sick, who had a hangover, who missed work because of a scorpion situation. Yes, that's a real excuse. Back inside the tomb, you begin painting. Today it's Raz's solar bark bright yellows, lapis blues, carefully outlined in carbon black. You use fine brushes made of chewed reeds. It's delicate work, and the symbolism must be exact. One wrong stroke, and Raz's eternal journey might veer dramatically off. You hum quietly to yourselves, something rhythmic, something ancient. It keeps the hands steady. This isn't just art, it's protection. You're making sure the soul of the tomb's occupant doesn't get eaten by a crocodile-headed demon named Amit. No pressure. Lunch comes late. More bread, more beer, a few dates if you're lucky. You sit in the dust, passing a fig around like it's treasure. Someone makes a joke about Set's ears looking like donkey handles. You laugh and immediately feel guilty. Set hears everything. Afternoon is for polishing. You smooth the stone with fine sand, buff the paint, then sit back to squint critically at your own handiwork. The line of Ra's staff is slightly crooked. You sigh. Tomorrow, you'll fix it. Or add a flower next to it and call it a metaphor. As the sun lowers, the foreman signals the end of the workday. You pack your tools, brushes, chisels, pigment pots and climb back toward the surface, blinking against the harsh gold light of evening. You return to the village, where the children are playing a game involving sticks and ankle bones, and a scribe is arguing with his wife about how many loaves he definitely did not misplace. You wash your hands in a clay basin, dry them on your tunic, and head home. Dinner is modest: lentils, onions, more bread, maybe fish if someone caught it before the crocodiles did. You sit on your stoop, watching the stars emerge. The Milky Way above you was once considered a celestial river part of the god's realm. You trace it with your eyes, wondering which souls are sailing across it tonight. Before bed, you take a small papyrus scrap and sketch a Duda, a cat wearing a crown. You chuckle, tuck it into a jar, and blow out the lamp. The night is quiet, just wind, the rustle of date palms, and the low whisper of sand moving over stone. You lie down, your hands ache from carving. But there's pride in the ache. You helped build eternity today, and tomorrow you'll do it again. The bell wakes you, but not in a jarring way. It's soft, low, and resonant, like the gentle throat clearing of a very polite mountain. You're high in a Himalayan monastery now, somewhere in 12th century Tibet, wrapped in red robes and surrounded by the quiet certainty that you're exactly where and when you're supposed to be. You sit up on your mat. The floor is cold stone, smoothed by generations of bare feet. The air smells of yak butter, incense, and wood smoke, sweet, earthy, almost comforting. A candle flickers beside you. You reach for it, not to blow it out, but to place it beside your morning altar. Light is part of the offering. Your morning begins with silence. Absolute, sacred silence. The kind that makes your thoughts feel louder than they should. You sit in lotus position, spine straight, breath even, hands resting on your knees like sleeping birds. For the next hour, you chant silently an internal repetition of the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. Each repetition folds into the next like waves on a moonlit lake. Meditation isn't optional here. It's the first duty, and not just for peace of mind. It's believed to sharpen the soul, burn off karmic dust, and prepare you to handle the fact that you'll be debating metaphysics before breakfast. Your daily debate begins in the courtyard. Monks gather in pairs, one standing, one seated. The standing one claps their hands together in a loud, theatrical then asks a question about impermanence, compassion, or whether reality even exists. You respond without hesitation, quoting sutras or offering counter questions. It's not a fight, it's a sharpening, like steel on steel butt in socks. Historians still argue whether these monastic debates were more educational or performative. Some say they were purely philosophical. Others suspect they were a secret outlet for deeply suppressed competitive energy. Either way, they're exhausting. Afterward, you'd finally get breakfast. Roasted barley flour, kneaded with yak butter tea into a dense, doughy lump. It tastes like salty oats rolled in determination. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth. You spend the rest of your morning transcribing texts with a bamboo pen dipped in soot ink. You copy lines from the Prajna Paramita, one sacred syllable at a time. Each stroke must be precise. There's no whiteout. There's only starting over, which you do often. You pause occasionally to stretch your fingers, glance at the prayer flags fluttering outside, or take a sip of the now called yak butter tea. It has a greasy film that coats your tongue like spiritual duct tape. Lunch is rice and lentils, eaten cross-legged on the floor. You share with the younger monks, guiding them on when to bow, when to chew, and when to look deeply contemplative, despite wanting seconds. After lunch, you join the chore rotation. Today, turning the prayer wheels. Each spin is said to be equivalent to chanting all the prayers inside these of syllables, compacted into one world. You walk the line of bronze cylinders, giving each one a slow, reverent spin. It's hypnotic. You feel like time is folding in on itself. Quirky fact of the day. Tibetan monks sometimes constructed intricate sand mandalas for days, or even weeks only, to sweep them away as a reminder of him. You've helped sweep 3 this year. You cried during the first one. Now, you just bow and let it go. Progress. Later in the afternoon, you study logic, Sanskrit, astrology, medicine. It's not just prayer here, it's education. You learn to diagnose illness by pulse and urine color, and to chart a birth chart that could outshine any zodiac app. Your tutor quizzes you on the Abhidharma, and you resist the urge to scream gently into your robe sleeve. Evening approaches. You help prepare the gyuta, offerings more, symbolic food items presented to drive away negative forces before the new moon. It includes barley, butter sculptures, and something suspiciously like dried cheese. The ritual is more dramatic than usual. Tonight there's fire involved. You chant as the flames rise, the wind tugging at your robes, smoke curling skyward like incense from a cosmic offering plate. As darkness falls, you return to the meditation hall for Chad, Praktisaniri. Powerful ritual where you visualize offering your own body as a feast to spirits and demons. Not out of despair, but as an ultimate act of compassion and ego release. You chant, drum slowly, and imagine letting go of every attachment, every fear, every possession. Even your favorite yak. By night, you're tired but calm. The wind whistles outside. You clean your ink-stained hands, fold your robe with precise symmetry, and lay your head on a rolled-up woolen cloth. The room is pitch black. Not even a sliver of lamplight. You'll listen to the stillness. Not silence. Stillness. It hums with meaning. You close your eyes and let the day dissolve like a sand mandala in wind. You have nothing, and in that, you rest. The scent hits you first. Wood smoke, damp wool, and a lingering hint of salted fish. You wake slowly, curled beneath a fur blanket in a longhouse somewhere in 9th century Scandinavia. Your feet are numb. Your nose is colder. Welcome to Viking life. The fire's nearly out, and it's your turn to fix it. You rise, groaning like a weathered ship, and shuffle across the wooden floor. The hearth embers glow faintly red orange eyes in the ash. You grab a split log, feed the flames, and blow until the room starts to feel slightly less like a meat freezer with decorative axes. Morning routines here are pragmatic. No time for poetry. Your family stirs as the smoke curls up into the smoke hole in the roof. No chimney, just hope. You throw on a tunic that still smells faintly of last week's stew and strap on a belt knife. You're going to need it for absolutely everything today. From carving driftwood, to slicing bread, to warding off existential boredom. Breakfast is simple. Rye, bread, dried fish, a lump of goat cheese, an ale. Always ale. It's low alcohol, but enough to remind you that water's mostly a summer sport around here. You eat with one hand while lacing your boots with the other. Outside, the fjord is cloaked in mist, and the mountains loom like sleeping gods. You take a moment to greet the sky with a nod just in case Thor's watching. Then it's off to the boat shed. Today's task: repairing the hull of a Nar, the wide-bellied cargo ship your uncle nearly sank trying to outrow a storm. You mutter something impolite about his decision-making and grab your adze. Work is cold and rhythmic. Chisel, patch, pitch. You joke with the others as your breath fogs in the air. Someone tells the story of a warrior who mistook his own reflection for a droga and punched a barrel. Everyone laughs. Quietly. You don't laugh loudly here. It attracts seagulls and bad luck. You take a break midday to share dried apples and barley porridge. You sit on overturned crates, boots steaming, knives on your belt, and stories on your lips. Someone brings up Bjorn's cousin who claimed he saw Jomunganda, the world serpent. Historians still argue whether Viking myths were purely symbolic or a product of too much fermented herring and long winters. Either way, the serpent makes a good lunch topic. After the meal, you help your sister with loom work. Yes, you, warriors can weave. Everyone helps. Because in this climate, cooperation means survival. The warp threads tighten like harp strings, and she shows you how to shuttle the weft without tangling it. The wool smells faintly of sheep and heroism. By afternoon, a messenger arrives from the next village. News travels in small bursts, hereward of a trade ship returning, a wolf attack near the goat pens, and something about a suspiciously successful fisherman. You offer him a seat and a drink. It's customary, even if he smells like he's been sleeping in a pine tree. Quirky tidbit of the day. Viking hygiene was surprisingly advanced. Combs, tweezers, and even ear spoons have been found in graves. You might stink from the boatwork, but by Odin, your beard is combed and your nails are tidy. Pride is still a thing, even in the mud. As the sky darkens, you take part in the evening thing, the village meeting. It's informal, held by the fire pit, and involves a lot of pointed silence before someone finally says, well, the goats need a new pen. Arguments are settled, chores assigned, and old feuds politely ignored until they become funny again. Dinner is a hearty stew of root vegetables, and whatever meat was unlucky enough to be caught. You sit with your clan, passing bread, telling stories, teasing the youngest until they fight back with a tale of their own. The old woman in the corner speaks of how her grandfather once saw Freya in the woods and came back with a nosebleed and an eel. The stars emerge like silver runes overhead. The longhouse smells of wood and broth and the faint tang of history in the making. You help bank the fire, set out the sleeping furs, and check your boots for spiders. Again, before sleep, you carve a small charm of tiny Thor's hammer, shaped from bone. You'll string it on your belt tomorrow, not because you're afraid, but because routine is its own kind of shield. You lie back, wrapped in warmth, listening to the soft snores, the wind outside, and the creak of beams above you. Life here is hard, yes, but it's honest. You know your place, you know your people. You know that tomorrow there will be fish to gut, fires to stoke, boats to mend, and always stories to tell. And with that, your eyes drift shut, and the gods, probably, nod back. The scent of garlic and fresh earth rises around you as you blink awake to the gentle clatter of hooves and wooden wheels. You're on a Roman villa farm, now Italy, somewhere around 70 CE. The sun hasn't quite risen, but the day has already begun. The Romans didn't do sleeping in, especially not you, because you're a villicus, the estate's overseer, and the olives aren't going to press themselves. You sit up on your straw-stuffed mattress, brush hay from your tunic, and mentally prepare to argue with 3 slaves about irrigation, 2 freedmen about grain inventory, and 1 goat that thinks it's in charge of the poultry yard. Routine here isn't just routine, it's empire maintenance, one sunrise at a time. The lararium, the small household shrine near the kitchen, gets your first attention. You light a bit of incense for the household, gods the Lares, and Penatus murmuring, a sleepy prayer that today brings more grapes than arguments. You're not sure they're listening. They might be unionizing. Breakfast is modest. A hunk of bread, a smear of garlic paste, and a swig of watered wine. It's not indulgent. Romans save their decadence for dinner. This is peasant chic. You eat, leaning against the stone wall while scanning the horizon for ominous clouds, or equally ominous tax collectors. You'll bark orders at the plow crew, check the calendar for the next dies, and inspect the amphorae of olive oil for signs of tampering. Spoiler, someone's been dipping. Again, you make a mental note to glare meaningfully at the younger workers. That usually does it. By mid-morning you're in the fields. The slaves are pruning grapevines under your supervision, quick, methodical, wearing straw hats and expressions of quiet rebellion. You adjust your own hat and quote a line from Virgil to no one in particular. It makes you feel noble. They pretend not to hear. Historians still argue whether Roman estate labor was as orderly as surviving farm manuals suggest, or if those guides were more like wishful thinking, scrolls written by idealistic senators who had never met a real donkey. Either way, your donkey just knocked over a grain basket, so score 1 for reality. You step into the granary to take inventory. You love this part. The amphorae lined up like obedient soldiers, each marked with dates, volumes, contents. You run your fingers along the cool clay and smile. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. The empire runs on grain. You are a very, very small cog in a very, very large bureaucracy, but a cog nonetheless. Lunch is served under the shade of a fig tree. It's barley porridge with chickpeas, hard cheese, and maybe, just maybe, a pickled egg if you're lucky. One of the farm boys shares news. Someone in the next villa over broke their arm trying to wrestle a wild boar. You nod sagely and pretend this isn't the highlight of your week. Afternoon is for paperwork. You retreat to the shade, roll out a wax tablet, and start etching notes with your stylus. You update production figures, note who's worked how many hours, and try to decode the absolutely cursed handwriting of the scribe who last recorded the olive yield. You consider firing him, then you remember he's also the best cook on the estate. You sigh. He lives another day. Quirky fact: some Roman farm overseers actually kept journals, one of which included multiple lines about a chicken that refused to lay eggs, unless it was sung to. You're beginning to suspect your own poultry has developed similar diva tendencies. Evening approaches, and it's time to visit the villa owner. He's in town most days, politicking and pretending to be busier than he is. But tonight, he's come to inspect the harvest and make polite inquiries about which wines are maturing well. You answer in proper Latin, gesturing at the vines like a proud parent showing off a particularly gifted tree. After he leaves, you exhale. You survived the social part. Now back to your people. As the sun sinks low, the workers return from the fields, dusty and tired. You supervise the tool cleanup, settle a minor dispute over cart usage, and feed the goats before they try to feed themselves. You make a note to patch the fence again. It's less fence now and more aggressive suggestion. Dinner is hot lentil stew with herbs and stale bread dipped in olive oil. You sit with your staff, telling jokes, swapping minor legends, and staring at the orange sky like it might suddenly offer better weather patterns. Someone plays a pond pipe. It's off-key, but appreciated. Before bed, you walk once more through the estate. The vines are quiet. The olives are heavy. The air smells of earth and smoke and something faintly citrusy that you can't quite place. Maybe it's just peace. You stop by the lararium again. This time, your prayer is simple. Let tomorrow be predictable. You know it won't be. There will be broken tools, stubborn animals, late grain deliveries, and probably another lecture from the owner about maximizing fig production. But tonight, the gods feel generous. Or maybe it's just the wine. You lie down again on your straw bed. Your back hurts, your feet are dusty, and your tunic smells like goat. But everything's where it should be. And in Rome, that's the most anyone can hope for. You wake to the sound of bells, not ringing for worship, war, or weather but time. Monastic time. You're in a Benedictine abbey somewhere in 10th century France, and your entire day has been divided into divine slices. It's just past. Matins the midnight service on. Now it's Lauds, the early morning prayer. You haven't slept much, but that's kind of the point. The rule of Saint Benedict doesn't allow for lazy mornings or personal alarm clocks. God's time is the only time that matters, and he likes to start early. You rise from your straw-stuffed mattress in the communal dormitory, wrap your woolen habit around you, and shuffle out into the dim hallway. The air is cold and sharp with incense residue, and your breath fogs faintly as you walk in silence toward the chapel. The chanting begins before you're even fully seated. Look, droning, harmonious Latin, psalms, antiphons, sacred melodies that rise like warm smoke. You don't sing so much as blend a single note in a living chord. It's beautiful, it's monotonous, it's timeless. The service ends, and the routine continues. You return to your cell, wash your hands with icy water from a basin that appears to have never met warmth, and prep for the day's labor. Because despite what movies might have told you, monks don't just pray and write their work. You've been assigned garden duty today. You trudge out to the cloister garden, where the early frost clings to the edges of the cabbage leaves like a saintly halo. You harvest herbs for the infirmary, check on the leaks, and briefly chase a chicken that has somehow developed a personal vendetta against you. Gardening is part of the monastic rhythm ora et labora, pray and work. Historians still argue whether this ideal was consistently practiced or just a pious aspiration. But you You've got dirt under your fingernails and psalms in your head. You're multitasking. Breakfast comes after prime, the first daylight hour. You eat in silence in the refectory, the dining hall where meals are accompanied by scripture readings rather than small talk. Today, it's a passage about humility. You nod as you chew your bread, even though the reader has a voice like a dying flute. Your meal is simple: coarse bread, a boiled egg, and thin ale. Water isn't always clean, so the monks brew their own low-alcohol ale, known for being both refreshing and mildly disappointing. Still, it pairs well with dry bread and eternal obedience. After breakfast, it's time for copying manuscripts. You sit at a sloped wooden desk in the scriptorium, squinting at faded vellum and dipping your quill into iron gall ink. You've been working on the same passage from Augustine for 3 days. One wrong stroke, and you're scraping parchment with a knife. Again, calligraphy is delicate. You practiced unsheathed script today, rounded, formal, beautiful. You murmur the words as you write, not out of devotion, but habit. The letters become prayer, even if your wrist begs for mercy. Quirky detail. Some monks would draw tiny doodles in the margins when bored boredom. Of course, being a deadly sin, so the doodles were discreet. A snail fighting a knight, a cat chasing a bishop's hat. You once drew a chicken with a halo. No one's noticed. Yet, before noon, you break for terce, the third prayer service of the day. You chant more psalms, then return to your chores. Today, that's cleaning the chapter house, sweeping out ashes from the warming room, and mending a torn robe. The abbey is cold, damp, and heavy with the scent of candle wax and duty, but it's yours. Lunch arrives after sex midday prayerand, consists of lentil stew, more bread, and a single wrinkled apple. Conversation is still forbidden. A novice sitting nearby accidentally sneezes during grace, and the reader skips a beat in the Gospel of Luke. You pretend not to notice. The afternoon is filled with more manual labor, hauling firewood, clearing brush, and patching a roof tile that's been leaking since Charlemagne. The sky is grey, the work repetitive, but your mind floats. You think about yesterday's gospel reading, and whether monks ever get to laugh during Easter. At none the 9th hour, you pause to chant again. Your voice is hoarse, but the rhythm soothes you. Psalms become punctuation marks in your day. They divide the hours, carve the time, keep everything from turning to fog. Evening draws near. You wash your hands again, ritual and hygiene in one motion, and prepare for Vespers, the most beautiful service. Candles are lit, shadows flicker across the chapel walls. The chanting is slower now, more melodic. The notes seem to hover longer in the air, like they're afraid to settle. After Vespers comes the evening meal, vegetable broth, maybe cheese if it's a feast day, and an unripe pear that tastes like regret. You eat thankfully, remembering that Benedictine monks rarely waste food. Even the crusts go to the poor or the chickens, whichever is louder. You spend the final part of your day in quiet study. A copy of Boethius rests on your lap. You try to read, but your eyelids betray you. The words blur. You fold the parchment gently and return it to its shelf. Compline is the last prayer of the day. The candles are low. The air feels thick with sleep and reverence. You recite the final psalms, bow, and cross yourself. Then it's back to your cell. No talking, no noise. Just you, your bed, and the soft weight of silence. You lie down beneath your wool blanket, which smells like every damp monastery blanket in recorded history. The bells are quiet now. The stars, invisible behind thick clouds, seem content to wait. You exhale slowly. Another day measured in prayers. Another life built from silence. Your eyes open to a haze of smoke, laughter, and the heavy perfume of roasted meat. You're in the heart of a bustling Mughal court, perhaps for Tefet, in the late 1500s, where every morning feels like waking inside a living tapestry. Gold-threaded awnings flutter above your head. You are, by all appearances, a low-ranking court poet, which means you're both wildly irrelevant and expected to be perpetually eloquent. Your morning begins in the servants' quarters of the harem, mind you, but in the outer ring, where poets, painters, musicians, and oddball tutors live like semi-reef. The first sounds you hear, the soft splash of water basins, the clatter of copper utensils, and a muezzin's call drifting in the wind. Layered over the rustle of peacocks strutting like minor gods, you stretch, adjusting your silk sash, and offer your daily dua to the morning sky. It's a strange combination of spiritual routine and sheer superstition. You thank the stars for keeping the scorpions out of your sandals. Again, then it's time to present yourself brushed and appropriately humbled for morning audience. You make your way across the marble courtyard where nobles gather in groups that seem casual, but are in fact one political misstep from exile. You mutter pleasantries, quoting a ghazal or two, and try not to trip on your own robes. At the Duanaikos, Emperor Akbar himself holds informal debate. His court isn't just opulent tits. Hindu pundits, Jain monks, Jesuit priests, and Sufi mystics all gather under one dome, exchanging philosophical barbs in a stew of Sanskrit, Arabic, Farsi, and Portuguese. You nod sagely. You understand about 20%. Historians still argue whether Akbar's house of worship was a genuine intellectual exercise or just a brilliant way to make sure no one ever felt too comfortable. Either way, it's your job to write a clever couplet about it by sunset. Breakfast arrives late. Flatbread hot off the lentils spiced with cumin and cardamom, and a boiled egg wrapped in banana leaf. You sit beneath a fig tree, taking careful bites while composing a verse about how mango season reminds you of unrequited love. It's mediocre, but the rhythm's good. Later in the morning, you're summoned to assist in reviewing a new translation project. Akbar's court is famously multilingual, and today it's the Mahabharata being adapted into Persian. You'll stand beside a much older scholar, nodding as if you understand both texts. You don't, but you fake it with poetic metaphors about dharma and destiny. Midday brings a shift in energy. The musicians begin practicing for the evening's mefila kind of court salon where music, poetry, and deeply passive-aggressive compliments are traded like currency. You pass a young sitar player who hums a rag that makes your spine buzz. You forget your own name for a moment. Then, nap time? Yeah. You return to your quarters, draw the blinds, and rest on a woven mat with a damp cloth on your forehead. The heat outside is ruthless, and everyone with sense knows the post-lunch hours are for sleep, dreams, or philosophical sulking. You wake to the sound of a pigeon hopping across the tile. The afternoon is for writing. You sit by the window, quill in hand, attempting to turn the heat-induced stupor of your soul into a few satisfying lines. You manage a stanza about how the moon once declined your love letter and returned it unread. It might be your best work. Quirky tidbit of the day: Mughal poets often competed by improvising verses on themes given on the spot. One record describes a challenge where the theme was dust in the emperor's sandals, and 5 poets wept trying to make it sound noble. You once got onions in winter. It's fine. You're recovering. As the sun dips low, you, Dan, your finer tunic still modest, but with embroidery that whispers I'm trying, and make your way to the garden for the mehfil. The air smells of rosewater and jasmine. Lamps are lit, casting soft shadows across the marble pool. Music flows, first deep drums, delicate strings, voices trained in decades of raga and riyaz. Then the poetry begins. You're fourth in the lineup. You listen politely to the others, nodding with practiced appreciation, even when their metaphors involve far too many celestial bodies and not enough verbs. Your turn comes. You rise, steady your breath, and recite. Your voice quivers at first, but soon finds rhythm. You speak of the emperor's generosity, of the wind's loyalty, of a lotus blooming despite bad luck. There's polite applause. Someone nods. You sit, heart still racing. You know you're not the best in the room, but you showed up, and in this court, showing up with grace matters more than genius. Dinner follows, informal and full of laughter. Trays of saffron rice, lamb stew, dates, and sweet yogurt circulate. You sit cross-legged beside a painter who tells you he's been sketching elephants all week, and now dreams only in tusks. You promise to write him a lullaby. Before bed, you stroll once more through the garden. The night jasmine is in bloom. The moon, full and round, reflects in the marble pool, as though the court itself has dipped the sky in silver. You return to your chamber, light a single oil lamp, and stretch out on your mat. A half-finished verse whispers at the edge of your thoughts, like a melody waiting to resolve. You'll write it tomorrow. For now, you sleep in the arms of poetry and dust. You're lying on a woven reed mat under a ceiling of rustling palm fronds, and the heat is already finding you. This is 15th century. Tenochtitlan Capita of the Aztec Emperenda city is humming awake like a living organism. You stir, careful not to knock over the clay water jug at your side, and take a long drink. It tastes of the lake, cool, slightly earthier relief. You stretch, rise, and fold your sleeping cloak. No privacy walls here, just family, neighbors, and a shared understanding that everyone snores. You glance out at the canal behind your home. It glitters in the morning sun, and the Chinaposta floating gardens are already dotted with farmers guiding canoes with long poles. Your routine begins with offering. You place a pinch of ground maize on a small stone at the doorway and whisper thanks to Tonantzin, the Earth Mother. The birds above you sing, or possibly argue. Either way, the sky feels busy. You grab a woven basket and head to the market. Today, you're buying amaranth and cacao. You're a scribe, part artist, part bureaucrat, part historian. It's your job to record tribute lists, festival rituals, and the occasional emperor's family drama. You're trained in clackriololi, the art of pictographic writing, which means your handwriting is a lot more colorful than most. As you walk, the city unfolds around you, canals like streets, bridges arching between neighborhoods, temples towering in the distance like stone mountains. People move in every direction. Merchants with baskets of chili peppers, warriors with eagle-feathered cloaks, children chasing each other with suspicious-looking fruit. It's alive, loud, beautiful. The marketplace is a beast of its own. Historians still argue whether Tenochtitlan's Tianguis could handle 20,000 or closer to 50,000 people daily. But either way, it's chaos with rhythm. You barter for what you need using cacao, bean, as currency, and get a great deal on squash because the vendor thinks your hair looks lucky. You accept this as a compliment and move on. You return home and sit by your low desk, unfurling a long strip of deerskin covered in neat, painted glyphs. You're working on a codex recording last month's religious festival Lakaxaperlisli, the flaying of men. Cheerful name, isn't it? No one said your job was soothing. You mix pigments from ground minerals and bugs. Yes, Bugzan carefully outline a priest dancing in an eagle costume. The red is vivid, too vivid. Maybe you tone it down with a wash of cochineal diluted in water. Your parrot, who is entirely unhelpful, watches from the corner and offers an unsolicited mid-morning break. You chew a bit of toasted maize cake and drink attelé, a warm corn beverage with cinnamon. It's delicious and exactly the texture of slightly confused porridge. You dip your hands in a bowl of cool water and then get back to work. You're also documenting tribute from neighboring regions. This means endless lists of goods, feathers, obsidian blades, cotton cloth, cacao, jade, and the occasional jaguar pelt. You paint each item with care. A crooked glyph could mean confusion, insult, or in one infamous case a tribute demand for 10 barrels of frogs instead of frogs made of gold. As noon approaches, the drums begin. You pause, listening. A procession is heading toward the great temple. Priests, dancers, warriors, all moving in time to the beat. You watch from a rooftop as smoke rises from burning The scent drifts across the city, sharp, resinous, holy. Lunch is simple. Tamales filled with beans, seasoned with chili, and wrapped in maize husk. You eat in the shade, talking with neighbors about lake levels, temple repairs, and which noble's son just tried to bribe the priesthood with turquoise. It didn't go well. Afterward, you're called to the Comacac, the school for nobles' children, to assist with a lesson on the calendar. You explain how the Tanalpahuali interacts with the students nod, confused but polite. You tell them if they really want a challenge, they should try explaining it to a Spanish priest one day. Everyone laughs, even though you don't know yet how prophetic that joke might be. Quirky fact of the day. Some scribes added tiny jokes in unused corners of codices. A glyph for a rabbit with a flute, a fish wearing a crown. You're tempted to do the same today. You draw a jaguar snoring beneath a moon and hide it in the corner of the tribute list. No one will notice unless they have a very long day. Evening arrives with golden light. You return home, roll up your codex, and store your brushes in a carved wooden box. The parrot tries to eat your stylus. You bribe it with a pumpkin seed. Dinner is tlacoyos, thick tortillas stuffed with beans and herbs, grilled and crisp. You eat with your family. The canal water reflecting the stars as frogs begin their nightly chorus. The city softens around you, less bustle, more quiet paddling, murmured prayers, drifting canoes. Before bed, you return to your shrine, place a drop of water and a crushed marigold petal on the stone, and thank the gods for another day of color, order, and just enough chaos to keep things interesting. You lie on your mat, listening to the soft hiss of wind through the palm fronds and the distant thump of a drum echoing from the temple steps. Tenochtitlan never truly sleeps, but you do. You wake to the creaking of ropes and the slap of waves. It's not land beneath you now, it's the vast, churning sea. You're aboard a merchant dhow in the middle of the Indian Ocean, somewhere around the 14th century, and your cabin is roughly the size of a dignified coffin. You stretch carefully, avoiding the low-ceiling beam, and brace yourself against the sway. The ocean doesn't care about your balance or your sleep. The dawn is soft and blue. You clamber up to the deck, where the lateen sails flap gently in the morning wind, casting vast, triangular shadows. The crew is already up, muttering in Arabic, Swahili, Gujarati, Persian. This boat is a floating marketplace, a polyglot city without a You nod to the navigator, who's squinting at the sky. No compass, just stars, sun, wind, and absolute confidence. You're a trader's apprentice, which means you do everything from inventorying frankincense to mopping up after seasick goats. But this journey isn't just about karmas, it's a ritual. The Indian Ocean trade has its own rhythm. You ride the monsoon winds east in spring, west in fall. Today, you're headed toward Calicut, maybe Aden, depending on the weather, the goods, and the captain's mood. Breakfast is dates, flatbread, and briny cheese, eaten with your back against a crate of cinnamon bark. You check the cargo: ivory, cotton, carved teakwood, tiny glass beads, and one wildly annoyed peacock in a wicker cage. You don't ask where it's going. You assume it knows more than you do. By mid-morning the sky has cleared, and the deck pulses with movement. The helmsman shouts directions. A sailor sings a tune in a language you don't understand but hum along with anyway. You help patch a rip in the sail, tying each knot with fingers that still feel half asleep. You're getting better at Sihans Calist, Salt's card, but surprisingly nimble. Historians still argue whether dhows were built using pegged joints or sewn planks during this period. What you know is this: the deck creaks in specific ways when the swell's about to turn, and if the ropes go slack for even a second, something's about to snap. The midday sun arrives like a slap. You shelter beneath an awning strung with old canvas. Someone boils tea with cardamom, and you'd sip it slowly, grateful for the shade, the heat, the fact that the peacock has stopped screaming. You're responsible for today's log entry. You squat near the captain, who dictates in a blend of Persian and grumbles. You write with a reed pen on palm leaf parchment. Day 34. Winds favorable. Crew in good spirits. Exchanged fish for ginger with a passing vessel bound for Hormuz. One goat missing. You leave out the part where the goat jumped voluntarily. In the afternoon, you practice haggling phrases in Tamil. The first rule of trade: don't insult someone's mother with poor pronunciation. The second rule: always smile with your eyes, not your teeth. You test your lines with the first mate, who pretends to be a skeptical silk dealer. He drives a hard bargain. You lose all your imaginary peppercorns and half your pride. Quirky tidbit of the day: some dhows carried messages in coconut shells, tossed between ships like chatty sea pigeons. You write a quick poem, seal it in a carved shell, and send it off toward the horizon. Maybe someone will read it. Maybe a fish will. Evening descends in golden fire. You help hoist lanterns, maul clay dishes of oil with floating wick sitting. The ship aglow like a drifting constellation. You share dinner with the crew. Lentils, spiced rice, dried fish. Everyone tells stories, except for the peacock, who sulks regally and refuses to eat. One sailor claims he once traded saffron for a ruby the size of a date. Another swears he met a woman in Zanzibar who could predict storms by the way her cat sneezed. No one questions these things. Truth is elastic at sea. After the meal, the captain recites verses from the Quran, and someone else sings a lullaby from the Swahili coast. You hum along, not knowing the words, but understanding them all the same. Before sleep, you climb onto a coil of rope and stare at the sky. The stars are everywhere, absurd in number, flickering like silver embers. You find the Southern Cross, the Dipper, Venus blinking low. The sea sighs beneath you. You whisper a quick prayer. You're not sure to whom there are so many gods among this crew, but you figure one of them will hear you. And as the ship rocks gently, cradled by wind and current, you close your eyes, safe in your floating world of salt, spice, and silence.